Hello, and welcome back to the blog. This is Britt Mooney, and I am going to be talking about how the Bible is countercultural. This is Interpretive Rants, Part 7. And one of the main criticisms that you will hear if you try to teach the Bible, especially if you try to live it, is that the Bible is an old book. It's over 2,000 years old, or 2,000 years old or more. And so these people back then, they lived in totally different lands, totally different cultures, totally different time periods, and so they were really bound by things that we know better. And so in the last 2,000 years, we've learned a whole lot, and so therefore we can kind of dismiss what some of these people very clearly state, very clearly teach, because we know better, because it's been so old, and they were human, and so we can kind of understand that. And I want to make 2 points in relation to this. And the first point I want to make is that this is dangerous because the principles that God is trying to communicate in the Scripture are timeless. Whether from Genesis to Revelation, the principles that God is expressing are spiritual, but they're also timeless because God is timeless. God is immutable, and that means He does not change, and so He will not change. And so no matter when He is communicating, the truths that He is communicating are timeless and absolute. And so therefore, we have to remember that. Now, these things were culturally communicated, whether through language or certain terminology or stories or analogies. These things were culturally communicated. And so it is good interpretation to kind of not remove, but to recognize that cultural interpretation or that cultural context and to look at the spiritual principles that are really being expressed, that are timeless and are still applicable and relevant to us today. And so that's good interpretation, but it's bad interpretation to as you dismiss the cultural context, also dismiss those timeless principles that are sometimes very clearly spoken of. And the second point I want to make is that the Scripture, as it was written, was countercultural for its day. So to say that it's culturally bound is actually, it goes against the very testimony of Scripture, because the Bible specifically states, God states specifically within the Scripture, that whether it was the law with Moses in the Old Covenant or the New Covenant with people like Paul or Christ, that they were against the culture of their day. That these things of God, because they were of the Spirit and of something eternal, are actually against the things of the world. And so therefore, the Bible in its day, when it was written, when God expressed these things, it was meant to create a people who were not just going along with what the culture of its day was doing, but were actually supposed to be very different, markedly different from their culture, revolutionarily different from their culture, okay? And so when you deal with Moses or Paul, and you deal with something that these guys are saying, these guys weren't as culturally bound as we may think. In fact, they were probably more countercultural for their day than we understand. In fact, maybe even more than we are to our day. And so what we have to be very careful of is to take some things that are very strong and very clearly said, and some principles that are very clear, and to look back and to just kind of dismiss these truths, because Paul was willing to die for these truths. Paul was willing to literally die and be crucified. He was happy to do it. All right, this is not a man who was trying to compromise so he didn't cause a stir or something. I mean, he believed these things from the Spirit, and he spoke these things as truth. And just because we think we may know better, 2,000 years later, it's not necessarily true. And so we have to be really careful of these things. So thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye. God bless.